Phew, those were two truly excellent Divrei Torah. Can we just do one more round of Yesher Koach? Yeah. They were insightful, they were really deeply thoughtful, they were important. I'm really impressed with both of you. And I am going to respond to both of you, but unfortunately, I need to speak once again about anti-Semitism this morning, and this is my third time in 5 weeks, and I hope I'll be able to stop doing this soon. I feel like the fear in this parsha and the wrestling imagery and the anticipated confrontation fits the American and Jewish experience this week and this month very well. Just to give you a sense of what's come across my rabbinic field of vision in this week, as most people know, just before Thanksgiving, Donald Trump had dinner with Kanye West and Holocaust denier Nick Fuentes, fascist, racist Holocaust denier Nick Fuentes, and of course Kanye West has been spewing anti-Semitism everywhere. With 65 million followers, Kanye West influences 4 times as many people in the world as there are Jews in the world. So that's the first thing that I was dealing with fallout about this week, because this week was the week that they went on InfoWars and Kanye West directly said that he thought Hitler was good. I also this week met with parents at a public elementary school where swastikas were cut into trees, and the principal of the school was refusing to address anti-Semitism with the community and did not take the swastikas down for 3 weeks. Then I heard from 2 congregants about the hundreds of men in a group called Black Israelites. I want to be clear, there are 2 groups called Black Israelites, and one is good and our friends and sometimes meets here, and the other is this group, who are now standing, probably right now, outside of Barclays Center, which is a 20-minute walk from here. And they're there every day in defense of Kyrie Irving, alternately saying that the Holocaust didn't happen or that it did happen, but it was a good thing. That we Jews are the spawn of the devil, that we are not real Jews, but that black people are real Jews, and that now that everyone is waking up to that, that we will be enslaved. The fourth thing this week was I heard from a CBE member who's in college, a brilliant young woman who is very progressive and highly critical of Israel, but is finding that if she joins progressive student groups, she has to prove that she's an anti-Zionist and cannot complain if there is anti-Semitism spoken in those groups. And she's not comfortable joining the pro-Israel students because she can't criticize what's going on with the occupation or the Israeli government in those spaces. The fifth thing this week was yesterday, one of the suspects who was arrested 2 weeks ago for planning a violent attack on New York synagogues was let out on bail. Sixth thing that happened for me this week was that an AP reporter called me asking if I think that Jews will be safe in America in the future. And apparently another writer from Vanity Fair is getting ready to talk to me about that tomorrow. Seventh thing was that I was asked to participate in a vigil called Shine a Light on Anti-Semitism that's taking place in Times Square with the mayor and the governor. And the reason I was asked is apparently CBE this I hope is not true, is the only synagogue actively in relationship with a black church working on issues of anti-Semitism and racism, which we are doing, and they are hoping that will come because they need some example of that anywhere in our city. The eighth thing was that our state senator, Zellner Myrie, asked for our help in crafting a statement around the black-Jewish relationship and the anti-Semitism that's happening in the black community, and then also would I be in a conversation with him about deed theft, which is a problem I'll say a tiny bit more about in a minute. And then the ninth thing that happened this week was that I had a long talk with the mayor's faith liaison, Gil Monrose, about whether we might find some way to heal the rift between the black community and the Jewish community in Brooklyn, and whether we might set up a dialogue between black clergy and Jewish clergy here, or at least could black clergy make a statement that the Holocaust did happen and was a very bad thing, which seems like a pretty low bar. That was this week. So, before I get into the parsha, which I will do in a moment, I just need to define anti-Semitism for a moment, because there is so much confusion out there, and I just want to make sure that we get a little clearer about it. Anti-Semitism is a set of conspiracy theories. They are lies that are about Jewish people. And you know how you taught us, Galit, that when things go wrong, people look for someone to blame? And that when we don't know who to blame, we sometimes end up blaming the wrong people? Well, for more than 2,000 years, the world has been blaming the Jewish people for things that go wrong, and it's become something of a habit. And the thing about habits is that even though they're hard to break, every habit has a starting point. They all began somewhere. And if you can understand how the habit got started, you have more ability to break it. So that's why I'm teaching a book called Anti-Judaism by David Nierenberg. I'm going to be teaching it after Shabbat services starting on January 7th every week here in the sanctuary. Because it's a history of anti-Semitic ideas documenting exactly how and why each of the major lies about Jews got started. And we need to understand that better. Jews need to understand that better. Everyone needs to understand that better. Part of what's confusing about anti-Semitism is that it isn't just one idea. It's a whole bunch of different ideas. It's a cluster of ideas that keep changing because people blame Jews for whatever they don't like. So, for example, in this country, when the world was in a Cold War between capitalism and communism, and being loyal to America was being capitalist, Jews were called commies and were blamed for communism. And now that a lot of people feel that unregulated capitalism and extreme wealth are some of the biggest problems in the world, Jews are seen as capitalists and as in possession of illegitimate wealth. And the same pattern is true for nationalism and colonialism. When they were popular in Europe, no one associated them with Jews. And now that they're seen as evils in the world, Jews are portrayed as the most egregious perpetrators of them both through the state of Israel. Now, Israel is an expression of Jewish nationalism, and I believe that Jewish nationalism has become excessive and dangerous there. And we can argue whether Israel is a colonialist project, and I would say it is not, because Jews are indigenous to that land. Regardless, Jewish people are not the primary force behind or the primary representatives of either nationalism or colonialism. Let's remember that North and South America, all of Africa, almost all of Asia, and all of the Middle East were colonized by non-Jewish Europeans, who also, by the way, started nationalism. So, in addition, lately, we've been hearing a lot of claims that Jews were responsible for the African slave trade. Now, there were Jews involved in the African slave trade, and that is shameful. But the vast majority of people running the slave trade were not Jewish. Jews were not responsible for the slave trade, just like there were Jewish communists, and certainly there are Jewish capitalists, but Jews are not the cause or the driving force of either communism or capitalism. So here's the main point. If a Jewish person or a Jewish country does something bad, you should say a person did something bad or that country did something bad. You should protest it. You should try to stop it. But you don't say, that's what Jews are like, or that's who Jews are, or this whole societal or global problem is the fault of Jewish people. You see the difference? Now to the Torah. When our Parsha opens, Jacob is afraid because he's about to encounter Esau. In his prayer to God asking for help, he says, Katonti mikol hasadim v'kol ha'emet. I've always seen this moment as one of humility from Jacob, who's saying to God, I'm too small for all of the goodness you've bestowed upon me. That's how it's usually translated, and that's how it's usually understood. But Art Green reads it differently, and more literally. He hears Jacob saying to God, I have been made small by all of the goodness you've bestowed upon me. In other words, Jacob's saying, I haven't had to grow because you've made things so good for me. It's kept me small, and now it's time for me to grow. And then he enters into the wrestling. Maybe we can relate to this right now as American Jews. We've had it good and relatively easy in America. It's enabled us to, in some sense, become small, meaning to not make a big deal about our Judaism, to not make a fuss, to not be too Jewish, to blend in and succeed amazingly. And maybe now it's time to grow, because we've got wrestling to do. We've got really big wrestling to do. Samson and Galit, you both talked about Jacob wrestling with himself. Did anyone notice that when Donald Trump had dinner with Nick Fuentes and Kanye West, the leadership of Orthodox Jewry and other Republican Jewish leaders were silent? At first, neither the Orthodox Union nor Agudas Yisrael criticized Donald Trump for that dinner. A number of people I'm associated with through the New York Jewish Agenda worked hard behind the scenes to persuade them to make a statement against Trump dining with Nazis. For days, they were highly, highly reluctant to criticize him. It took a lot of work behind the scenes, but eventually they turned on him and they spoke out. It should not have been hard for the leaders of Orthodox Jewry or any Jewish leaders to denounce a former president and current presidential candidate dining with Nazis. This is a measure of how lost a portion of the Jewish world is right now. They have allowed uncritical loyalty to the Israeli government to become the sole test and measure of loyalty to the Jewish people. So much so that they have tolerated fascists, white nationalists, Nazis, and other open anti-Semites. It is a measure of ideological corruption and decay among our people that is shocking and deplorable and indefensible. We have got to face this. This is the kind of wrestling with ourselves that is necessary right now. As you both pointed out, Galit and Samson, many commentators imagine that Jacob was wrestling with a guardian angel of Esau, or Esau himself. That he was, in some sense, wrestling with the other, the opposition, one who wanted to do him harm. There are people out there right now who are speaking terrible lies about us, some of whom want us dead. There are more people, many more, who are being influenced, who are hearing lies and don't know what to think. And there are many people out there who know us and love us and will stand by us no matter what. We are a tiny minority in the world. We will always need and be interdependent with the other. We will always need to be in relationship with non-Jews. Rabbeinu Bachia points out that the verb here to wrestle, vaye'avek, is related to the verb chabek, to embrace. There's not that much difference between wrestling and embracing, and one can lead to the other. When it comes to Black-Jewish relations, a starting place in this wrestling and embracing is to remember that we are overlapping communities. Black Jews make up an important part of the Jewish community. And then we need to remember that we are living in a country decisively shaped by the enslavement of Black people and the caste system that grew out of it. The two most important elements to keep in mind are that the extraction of Black wealth is both historic and ongoing through things like deed theft right here in Brooklyn. And deed theft is when people come in, unscrupulous people, make deals with homeowners, convince them that they're doing something for them, helping them in some way, helping them with their mortgage, helping them if they're behind on their payments, and then get them to sign papers that turn over the deed. It's happening in Brooklyn. It's been happening a long time. And the second main idea is that Black people are consistently in our country cast as criminals. One of the primary anti-Semitic conspiracy theories is that Jews are wealth extractors, a stereotype that predates the Black-Jewish relationship, but hits a nerve in Black history and in Black experience. To complicate matters, a disproportionate number of Jews have been and are engaged in deed theft in Brooklyn, meaning taking Black people's houses illegally. What I said to Pastor Waterman, our friend at Antioch Baptist Church, is that when that happens, we should all denounce it and together say, the people who did that are bad people, not that's what Jews are like. And when Black people say anti-Semitic things, if white people treat them like criminals and call for big punishments against them, that's just what happened with Kyrie Irving, we are perpetuating systemic racism and not facilitating learning or intergroup understanding, playing the role of the cops against the criminals. Instead, our stance ought to be, that thing you said was bad and not right and not true, and let me explain why. And better yet, building the relationships of trust with our Black friends and allies that they should be able to say that on our behalf. In the Torah, the wrestling between Jacob and Esau did lead to embrace between the brothers, and tears and kisses and forgiveness and seeing each other's faces as if they were the face of God. And I believe that's possible for us too. And finally, we wrestle with God, who made us Jews. Did God mean for it to be this hard? We know that we've become too small in our Jewishness. For a lot of us, it hasn't been high on our priority list. We've been trying to provide for our families and contribute our gifts to the world and heal human society and its many forms of injustice and find a new way to live on the earth so our grandchildren can have a future. We're busy. A lot of us don't even believe in you, God, at least not in the ways that our ancestors articulated it. So we come into your sanctuaries and we wonder whether we really belong here. Kind of have one foot out the door. And because we haven't really been challenged as a people in a really long time, we haven't had to claim being Jewish with our whole hearts and our whole minds and our whole souls. We haven't had to determine what we ourselves, each of us differently, absolutely love and are proud of about being Jewish. For a lot of people, it's not going to be prayer. I get that. And it's not going to be Torah for a lot of people. But we each have to find something we love about being Jewish because it is who we are. And it could be Jewish literature or history or even comedy. It could be holidays and family or community, you name it, but it has to be something so that we walk through the world with our heads up high about the brilliant, creative tradition we come from so that we feel real love and affection for our own people. It is time to grow bigger, Jewish people, so that we can say wholeheartedly, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asani Yisrael. Blessed are you, Adonai our God, sovereign of the universe, who has made me a Jew. Shabbat shalom.
Shakach.